Hey, thanks for joining us today. May 21st, 2019. My guest today is a good friend of mine, Bobby Farah. Thanks for joining me, Bobby.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being here. Most people that have any connection to Project Cold Case know who you are, know a little bit of your story. But today, we got time. Nothing has to be edited. Nothing has to be sped up. And we're going to share the whole story, which is, I mean, just every story about this case is interesting. But I've been lucky enough to be a part of a number of these specific things we're going to talk about today. And I think it's important that our viewers see the actual impact an unsolved murder and the solving of a murder has on a family. It's very complicated.
Very.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some very happy moments together.
Yep.
We've had some very frustrating moments together. But that roller coaster didn't stop when an arrest was made.
No, sir, it did not.
And so we're going to talk about that today. And just for those of you that might be joining us that don't know this story yet, you're gonna hear it all today. But the very basic part of this, so that we don't give away too much or get out of order, is that Bobby's dad was murdered in 1974, and that case remained cold for 43 years.
Correct.
And 2 years ago, a break came, and an arrest was made, and then things really got weird. So let's kind of set the stage here a little bit, Bobby, and take your time. If you don't want to answer something, of course, whatever you're comfortable talking about. I think you're pretty much comfortable talking about most of this stuff, but sitting down and doing it all right now,
No problem.
And I should say, like tomorrow is actually the 45th anniversary of your dad's murder.
That's correct.
So that adds a little something. A little emotion to it, but we kind of did that by design. We've been trying to figure out a time to get you in and sit down and have this conversation, and it dawned on both of us that we were at a point right now where we were at last week was the 2-year anniversary of the arrest. This week was the 45th anniversary of the murder, and what better time than to tell you the story than now.
Everything worked out.
Yeah. So. To get started, your dad was murdered in 1974, but prior to that, I mean, you're a child, 1974.
Yep.
You're 6 years old?
6 years old.
I don't have a lot of memories prior to 6. You know what I mean? There's like a window there from like 4 to 6 where I have like a handful of memories of anything.
Yeah.
But you have some of those memories of your dad.
Yeah. Definitely some really good memories. He used to take me to a store on the weekends. I'd stand on a milk crate and play with the coins in the change drawer.
Yeah.
I'd dust the shelves with a duster.
You'd keep yourself occupied with little fun things while he worked. And
my sisters weren't really allowed to go to the store because of the neighborhood that it was in, and kind of he just kind of wanted me there with him, I was the only boy. So.
You have how many siblings?
3 sisters.
3 sisters. You're the only boy.
Yeah.
You're the only son. Your mom at that time is a stay-at-home mom, takes care of the children. Where do you fall in the order?
I'm the second youngest, so
Okay.
I have two sisters that are older than I.
And a sister
And a
that's
sister that's younger.
Okay. We've had so many conversations over the last couple of years. I remember a story you told about being with your dad where the police ended up being called
Yeah.
to kind of help you.
My mom hates that story.
Does she? We'll skip over that.
It was just
Suffice to say,
it was just a silly little scenario at a service station, and they demanded more money from my dad
right.
than what was agreed upon.
And you had
That
interactions
was just
with
a memory that I had.
right. Yeah. Well, and you only have so many.
Yeah.
You know, you only had 6 years of life to
Yeah.
make any of those, and
Sure.
you know, we just don't unfortunately remember things when we're infants and 1 or
Right.
2 years old. So, you know, but your dad owned a convenience store.
Mm-hmm.
What was it called? Grand Park
Food Store.
Food store in a northwest
Yeah,
area of
it's,
Jacksonville, Florida.
Kings Road in Division.
Yeah.
It's still a convenience store today.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, I don't know what that area was like in 1974. I know today it's gone through some some changes and it's bad. Obviously, this.
I don't think it was really that bad of a neighborhood back then.
Yeah, I don't think so
It was,
either. That was my understanding.
There was a lot of respect. There was times were different. People were different. I remember going to the store and never had a fear of an issue or anything like that.
Yeah, and so kind of talk about again. You're 6 years old, so there memories about that day and the kind of time surrounding that your dad's murder. He goes to work one day. He's there with your uncle, and there's another customer in the store.
There was a young lady, 14 years old at the time.
She and somebody comes in and tries to rob your dad.
That's correct.
And we'll talk more about the details, but your dad ends up shot.
Right.
The suspect flees without anything, doesn't get any money, doesn't steal anything, takes off out of the store. It's 1974. The dynamic of your family changes immediately. Your dad's the sole breadwinner for your household. Tell us, a little bit about, that transition. What happened to your family as far as mom can't stay home anymore?
Yeah, she actually went back to school and finished some education. Went out into the workforce and worked. And my sisters, kind of helped take care of the house and the family. And my grandmother was living with us at the time.
You have a very tight-knit family.
Very tight-knit family.
And thankfully,
yep.
because it took a lot to kind of keep everything running
Together.
smoothly and keeping it together. And you at 6 years old, you can't take over the adult male responsibilities of a household.
Right.
At least not yet, but you had some uncles and some cousins and some, a lot of people that kind of helped make sure
together,
that you guys stayed together.
Absolutely.
And anybody that's been through this kind of traumatic loss knows that, it's anything can can derail a marriage, can derail relationships, friendships, even related, siblings and relatives. The stories I've heard, over the last couple of years, the people I've met in your family, that was never really an issue. You had a serious support system.
Yeah.
They really carried through to today.
Still to today.
Yeah. That's a testament to your family and the people that were around. Tell us a little bit about being a child, and you've told the story before. You see a police officer.
Yeah, I would ask, and tell them the scenario about my father, and say, "Hey, can you help me figure out who might have killed my dad?" And really that went on for years. Not every day, not every time, but
right.
I would mention it. I'd mentioned it to several people over the years,
and you have a lot of friends in law enforcement.
I do.
And so it's not like you were this total outsider. I mean, you would literally know people that were in law enforcement, that were detectives, or that were, that you could talk to, that you could ask for help, like legitimate. Hey, can you look into it? Can you see if there's anything? And that didn't go anywhere for a long time.
Didn't go anywhere until December of 16.
Yeah. So literally December 2016, your cousin Joey owns a restaurant in town, and it's a frequently filled with law enforcement, very pro law enforcement friendly establishment. I think we can say Southern Grill. I don't think Joey's going to be upset that we mentioned his.
Give him that plug.
Give him that plug. It's right over here on the South Bank, across the Main Street Bridge from downtown, the Police Memorial Building. And
it's 800 Flagler Avenue if anybody wants to.
If you want to go have lunch there. And you can probably find Bobby there most mornings. And I actually have an experience there with my dad's murder. When the detective called me to tell me, that they were suspending my dad's case and that it was going to be cold, we were meeting for lunch, and that's where he wanted me to meet him, and that was my first experience at Southern Grill.
It's kind of ironic how a lot of things have evolved. At that restaurant. So let's talk about that December 2016. A law enforcement officer that you have known for years, Dan Jansen. Well, you tell a story. You run into him. He's got a new position at JSO, but you bump into him. I'm sitting in my spot at the counter, and he walks in and he says, hey, what are you doing? I said, well, what did you do? You get a new job? You're all dressed up in a suit and tie. He's like, no, they moved me from homicide to cold case. And when he did that, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I was like, man, I got to talk to you about something. I got to share something with you. And he's like, what is it? So I got up. We moved over towards a soda machine, and I told him, I said, my dad was killed in 1974, and there's good evidence in the evidence room, for my dad's case. And I've asked in 98, but haven't asked since, really, because of just life being in the way. And he's like, Bobby, I've known you for 25 years. I never knew your dad was murdered. I said, well, I didn't have a reason to tell you until now, I guess.
Right.
And he said, well, who looked into it? And I told him Jim Parker had looked into it and had sent me some information. And I said, will you look into it? And he's like, yeah. He says, let me see what I can do. I said, well, I got some information. He said, I'll call you when I get back to the office. And I said, I'll go home. So I left. Yeah. I rushed home and pulled out my file of all the stuff I've been keeping of my dad's stuff. And he called me and we talked. And he's like, okay, let me look into it. And we'll go from there.
Yeah, and he, when you run in the cold case unit in a city the size of Jacksonville, Florida, where there's 1,400 or 1,500 unsolved murders, you can look into them, and unfortunately, a lot of them aren't going to go very far. Yeah. They're usually cold for a reason, not just because they were poorly investigated or, there's usually a reason attached to it. So, but that being said, too, with 1,400 or 1,500 unsolved murders, it's hard to know which of those actually does have valuable evidence, and, you can get somewhere. So, with our partnership with JSO, anytime a situation like that happens where, Sergeant Jansen runs into a family member or a family member calls and starts asking questions, he refers, let me get your information. By the way, did you know there's an organization, Project Cold Case, blah, blah, blah. They might be able to help you in the meantime while we're looking into this. So we had recently started a new partnership with them where we were asking them to submit cases to us, law enforcement to submit cases to us where they wanted the public to get more information. We're talking 1974. It wasn't like you could Google Freddie Farah's name and get any information. So he submits the case to us. He says, put this on your website, add it to your database. I'm gonna reach out to the family and kind of make the introduction. But that's how we're going to get the ball rolling.
It happened at the Southern Grill, by the way.
It did happen at Southern Grill, by the way. In the meantime,
you had posted it on your page.
On our page, yeah, we did a spotlight on it.
Tremendous amount of activity.
Yeah, we had a ton of views. But in the meantime, they were
kind of already working on.
They were doing the evidence stuff. Yeah. You know, we're not investigating these cases. We're just trying to raise publicity for them and awareness. They were looking into this case, and very early on, they realized that they had some fingerprints that had not been run through APHIS in 20 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that technology changes just like all technology changes, and the resolution of the prints and being able to read them, and the speed of the databases that it's searching is always improving. But on top of that, prints are being added. You know what I mean? All the time. So with the way technology is advancing with DNA and genetic genealogy and stuff like this,
amazing.
Fingerprints solved your dad's case.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just, you got to remember, this is a convenience store where there's people coming in and out every day. So we're not talking about, they found a fingerprint on the counter.
There was 3 items that he brought to the counter, the perpetrator brought to the counter. All 3 items had his prints and only his prints on it.
Right.
Which is wild.
And there were 3,
it was a cake mix, box,
cake frosting,
and a soda can.
And the eyewitness, the 14-year-old girl you talked about earlier, she's the one that connected
the dots with
the items.
I'm
at the counter. I watched this guy walk up and put these 3 items down.
Mm-hmm.
And they, as those prints hit, they have to still do their due diligence, the investigators. So they have to track this 14-year-old girl at the time, 43 years earlier, down, find her, and then say, do you remember anything from that day? And
ironically, she remembered,
and she remembered
very well, and the 3 items
exactly what. Yeah, and they said, her response then was, it was just like the report that she had given 43 years earlier, and she said, you don't see somebody killed in front of you and forget. She said, I have always remembered, what he put down. So the investigators, the detectives here in Jacksonville, they get his prints. They find out his name's Johnny Miller, and that his last known address is somewhere in New Orleans. And they drive over there. Detective Radigan, Detective Warkentine, they drive over there with an address. They show up at the door, and it's not Johnny Miller.
Yeah.
And they say, well, do you know this guy? And he says, oh, yeah, I think I know that guy. He's the Statue of Liberty down on French Quarter. Juggler. He's a street performer down on the French Quarter.
It was the landlord.
Yeah, it was the landlord of the building. He said, oh, yeah, I know that guy.
They're banging on the door to get a response from the landlord, and they're like, who are you looking for? And it goes from there, and they send him down to the French Quarter looking, and they're, showing this picture of this guy, a mugshot apparently of, I guess, from when he was arrested in Louisiana for some petty
misdemeanor charge or something.
Yeah. And
I think
at some point, one of the police officers they spoke to recognized him, grabs a flyer from Margot and says, yeah, but what you're saying he does is not what he does. Right. He's a human statue. He dresses up like Uncle Sam. He walks the dog on a leash. It's a stuffed animal, and blah, blah, blah. So one thing just led to another, and they actually had their hands on him by the end of the day, which is almost hard to believe,
It was crazy because, one, New Orleans has some really weird, Louisiana has some really weird laws and different things.
They couldn't detain him right away. They had to question him.
But I think when the officer's telling him, the New Orleans officer's telling them who he is, he says something along the lines of, but I haven't seen him in a couple weeks or something like
Yeah.
that. And so the detectives go, well, we're going to head back to the hotel. Call us if you see him. You know, we'll regroup tomorrow. We're going to go check in or whatever.
Yep.
And they hadn't even gotten to the hotel. I think they said they were putting their key in the door when their phone rang and said, I got your guy, and he's, you know,
And he's
down.
standing right here with me.
Yeah.
You know, I think Margot asked them, can you detain him? And they are like, no, we can't, you know. And she said, well, you know, what's going to happen? I mean, will he stay there until we get there? And they're like, well, yeah, we'll try to keep him.
Yeah, we'll try it. Yeah, if he wants to,
and
basically.
Oddly enough, he stood there and waited, and she got there and had to, from what I understand, walk him 2 blocks, if I remember correctly, to a precinct, and, you know, asked to use one of their, interrogation rooms.
Yeah, interview rooms.
We've got some
there's a picture of that.
video of that somewhere.
And he,
you got to wonder if he was just, after maybe looking over his shoulder for all that time. If
look at these pictures. That's your dad.
Yep.
That's Freddie Farah.
That's my dad right there.
There's Johnny in the interview room in his
get up,
Uncle Sam, Uncle Louie get up, waiting to be interviewed. Had to be an interesting moment for him. I really would. I'm curious.
No,
the dog under
it's his feet.
Yeah.
At the bottom.
But I'm sure his dog was there somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was with him. This was the big announcement back here in Jacksonville, the press conference with the sheriff, and there's the detective Dan Jansen to the sheriff's right, and then Margot and Glenn and the Daves.
The two Daves, great guys. All those guys are great guys.
Dave Scott and Dave Meacham, and your family over here to the left. You,
me,
right
Joey
there.
standing behind me,
you.
the owner of the Southern Grill.
Sharon in the back.
My
your mom
and my 2 sisters.
That still live locally.
Yep,
right?
they're still here locally.
Your other sister lives out of town, but
she lives in California.
Yeah, here's some pictures that were used in the media, of your dad and your family.
Yep.
And I think I'll never have the opportunity to interview Johnny Miller, probably because I'd be a little biased and probably couldn't keep my composure. And not that I'd hurt him, but just that I'm hurt for your family and what you all went through. But I'd really like to know what was going through his mind when detectives from Jacksonville, Florida came and said, you, Johnny Miller, I'm cold case homicide detective from Jacksonville, Florida. I would like to talk to you about a 1974 case. I mean, because he knew what that meant.
if you watch the interrogation video, it's so evident that he knew exactly what they were there for. He knew exactly what they were questioning about. He denied it, but you could see the guilt on him. There's even a conversation in that interrogation room. I've played it back maybe 10 times.
Yeah, sorry about that. We were having some lag there. Hopefully, everybody was able to follow along with that. We're going to show a local video, the news segment that was done, kind of in conjunction with where we're at in the story here. I think it happened about the time he was brought back over here. He basically they interview him. He denies.
Right.
What you're saying. He denies everything. He did live in Jacksonville at some point, but he's never been in that store.
He denied going to the store.
Right.
He denied, he even said, that's not where our folks hang out and this and that, which is totally incorrect.
And they had to, literally be like, are you sure you never in that store? Because they have the fingerprints, the proof. They're not telling him this, but they have the proof that he was in there.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, I hate to say this, but had he said, "Oh yeah, I was in that store all the time," they really maybe not have been able to arrest him.
Right.
So the fact that he denied it
actually
was
worked
what we needed to make the arrest.
Yeah, he was adamant that he had never been there before. Let's show that clip, and then we'll talk more about what happened after that.
For families waiting for answers about the murder or disappearance of a loved one, waiting can be one of the hardest parts. Some have waited several years, others several decades. But earlier this year, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office made an arrest in a case that was nearly 43 years old. Bobby Farah remembers spending days with his dad at the family store, standing on a milk crate and counting coins, just excited to be hanging out with his dad. He also remembers it was a Wednesday, the day he found out.
It was just, as a 6-year-old boy, as I got older, I would always see a police officer and ask him, hey, you know, my dad was killed. Can you help me find out who killed my dad?
His father, Freddie Farah, was working at his Grand Park food store in 1974 when a witness recalls a young man walked in, demanded money, then shot Freddie and ran off. Freddie's family was devastated. Bobby says his parents loved each other deeply, and his mother had to become the rock of the family for Bobby and his 3 sisters. As the years stretched into decades, Bobby kept pursuing answers in his father's case.
Someone was out there that was responsible, and I wanted to find out who that person could be.
More than 40 years later, on another Wednesday, Bobby got a call from a sergeant at JSO to bring in his family and come by the station.
They sat us down and they told my mom, they spoke pretty much directly to her,
telling them that officers had taken 60-year-old Johnny Miller into custody in New Orleans for the murder of his father.
I don't exactly remember what I said or what I did when I walked out of the room, but I kind of remember putting my hand down on the table saying, I knew it. You know, I knew somebody was out there that was responsible, just a matter of finding them.
So Miller approached the counter with some items, pulled out a gun and demanded money from Freddie Farah.
Sheriff Mike Williams described the arrest as good old-fashioned police work mixed with new DNA and fingerprint technology. And as technology advances, social media is also changing the game, helping connect witnesses to law enforcement. That's the goal of Project Cold Case, a local organization creating a searchable database of cold cases and spotlighting cases on social media in hopes that witnesses will come forward, a group that has spotlighted the Farah case in the past. Project Cold Case founder Ryan Backman also lost his father at a shooting, and the case remains unsolved. But he says seeing an arrest in the Farah case after decades,
that should give everybody that has one of these cases hope, and it should make them realize that law enforcement isn't giving up. You shouldn't give up. If you have a case out there that has physical evidence, you should probably, give law enforcement a call and just ask them when the last time that evidence was tested.
And Bobby Farah says he knows it is not easy. It's hard to wait for the answers, but never give up.
Because you never know when somebody could come forward and give just that little piece of information that leads to a bigger piece of information.
All right, so that was actually a long news segment, yeah. But the reason why we wanted to sit down here today was because you can't fit everything into a 3-minute segment, and we've caught you up today. I mean, we've gone through the longest amount of time, as in from 1974 to 2017 when he's officially arrested in May of 2017. But that's only part of the story. That's getting us to that point. But then he is extradited here.
Yep. He's
housed in the pretrial detention facility, which is fancy talk for the jail. And he's awaiting trial for the murder of your dad in 1974. We kind of skipped this because now he's been arrested, but basically while they're in New Orleans, they get that denial that allows investigators and detectives to arrest him for the murder of your father. Because like you had said, if he had just said, oh, I was in that store 3 times a day, I had my morning coffee there, I ate a hot dog at lunch, and then that would complicate. Not that they wouldn't have necessarily been able to make an arrest, but that would have made it a lot more complicated.
Definitely.
So now with his denial, they have proof that he was in that store. Mm-hmm. And again, it's why it's important that there's 3 separate items that don't necessarily go together. If it had just been 3 bags of Ruffles, you know what I mean? Like maybe that makes it complicated, but it's the cake box and mix and the soda can and the eyewitness that says, I watched
bring this, and this.
And Johnny Miller, suspect, was described as a young, tall, skinny black male, which is still the way he was 43 years later. You know, he's very tall, very thin. And so you get a call from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. At this point, you still don't know that an arrest's been made. You don't know that they've got a guy. You get a call that says, can you and your mom, any immediate family that wants to, come down?
Well, they kind of put a twist on it to kind of get us down there without, tipping
giving it
hand,
away.
obviously.
Right.
But like in January and February, maybe even into March, probably into March too, Dan had called me and asked me some series of questions, and really maybe 3 times called me with the same questions over and over again. So in April, at Easter time, I sat my mom down. We had Easter dinner at my mom's house and sat her down and my sister, my oldest sister, was there, and Sharon, my fiance. We sat down and I told her, I said, listen, something's happening in Dad's case. My mom's like, what do you think's happening? It's 43 years. What could they possibly find? I was like, Mom, I'm just telling you, based on some questions, I have a really good feeling that something's about to go down.
Yeah.
Okay, just let the Lord handle it and everything. And I'm like, okay, I'll let him handle it. But if they find something in the meantime, we're going to handle it too. You know? So that was in April, obviously. And then in May, they called us down there. And me and my mom went down there, walked in. As you know, you were there as well. I was there.
I got kind of that same call that was, can you be here? Are you on your way in? Yeah. Can you come straight to the Police Memorial Building? Why? Can you be here? Yeah. Can you come straight to the police? Bobby and his mom are on their way, and we're going to have a meeting, and we think that it would be good to have an advocate here. Is there something new?
Yeah.
Can you come down to the? You know what I mean? It's like
I asked Dan all those same questions too, and it was just
and
they
he
was
just
doing his job.
They are.
I never pushed him to.
No, and you can read between lines.
Sure.
Something was happening.
I told him.
Yeah, you can't. You have a feeling, something's up. Yeah. They had not called you and asked you to come. They'd asked you questions, but they had not called you and asked you to come down to the station.
Right.
To that point. So I get there before you, and they go, we're bringing them in, and we're going to tell them that we've got them.
Right. And Margot and Glenn were still in Louisiana.
Yeah, they're speakerphoned in.
They were speakerphoned in, and Margot was supposed to tell us, I think, from what I understand, to reveal the big deal. And she left it up to Dan.
Yeah,
Let's just put it that way. She left it up to Dan to make that announcement, and Dan looked at my mom and said, Bobby's been asking, and it's been looked into several times, and we looked into it, and we've made an arrest in your husband's murder.
Yeah.
And I put my hand down on the desk, and I was like, man, I knew it. There's something to that effect. I got up, I walked out, get my composure, and that's when you followed me.
I followed you out. There is no way. I mean, they could have told you on the phone that, hey, we've got a guy.
It's not the same.
Yeah, there's no way you could prepare yourself for sitting there and having, because at that point I did know, because they had told me that's why we got you down here. But like the build up, because they're trying to explain to you what happened.
Sure.
We got a lead, we got a tip, we went out to New Orleans. Glenn and Margot are on the phone. They're blah blah.
That was a Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it happened on a Tuesday and it was a Wednesday.
Yeah, because it happened.
Everything kept happening. My dad was killed on a Wednesday. There was a lot of things that happened throughout this whole process that happened on a Wednesday. It was kind of weird. It was very weird. My dad was born on a Wednesday.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was killed on a Wednesday.
And to find out on a Wednesday. And you did. You don't know how you're going to react in that situation, even if you played it over a million times in your head to actually get the news. And you did. I think, you know, you like, I knew it, you know, and then you kind of just spun around and went to the door. And we were like, where's he going?
I had to get my thoughts together.
Yeah. And I went out there and I mean, there's nothing I could say at that point. I just, you know, went out there to make sure, you know, that we could get back in. And, you know, that it was one of the most
emotional time. And I mean, I think we were in such shock we didn't know how to react. My mom was like,
she was.
Y'all stayed in there with her, so I really don't know what happened for the couple of minutes. So it seemed like I was out there for 30 minutes, but it was only like maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But it seemed like a long time. And when I came back in, they were still having a conversation. And they said, okay, he's back in. So we talked about some other things that were, you know, the process and everything else. But it was just, I don't know how, took a few days, I think, for me.
Yeah, to
really process what I've been hoping for all my life, you know?
Yeah, what you were pursuing.
Yeah.
I mean, not, you know, like...
You know, it didn't occupy every minute of my every day, but it never left my mind.
Yeah.
You know?
And when the opportunities presented themselves, you would...
Chime in.
But it wasn't, you know, a constant thing.
Yeah.
You're right. Your mom, I felt like in watching her reaction, I don't know that she ever believed that day would come.
Yeah.
You know, I think she had reserved herself to, you know, I'm never going to find out. Yeah. Surely it had impact. I mean, you've told stories about, you know, how strong she was and, you know, with having to raise 4 kids without, you know, that husband. And that she never really let y'all see her grief,
her downtime.
Yeah, but it was like she had resigned herself that she would never know who did it.
I think to her, this may sound strange, but to her at that point, she had put her faith in God, and just that was not important to her.
Yeah,
you know, taking care of the kids, getting us to where we needed to be, and you know, physically, mentally, financially, whatever it is, you know, she just, that's what she concentrated on.
That was her focus, yeah.
You know, my mom never remarried. She never brought another man in our house. You know, it wasn't, you know, just
she's an amazing
unbelievable
woman.
lady.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah, she is. And, but yeah, those days of afterwards, and I can't remember now what the deal was, but this news broke in New Orleans pretty quickly because he's Uncle Louie, you know what I mean?
Sensationalized.
Yeah. He's being
the perpetrator,
dragged into, you know, this cold case from 43 years earlier.
They got the wrong guy.
I mean, surely he's the wrong guy.
They did all kinds of.
Everybody thinks they know him because they saw him standing like a statue in the middle of the road.
It's funny because no one ever really knew his name. They only knew him as Uncle Louie.
Right, but they all felt like they knew him well enough to know what who
he was and
what he did in the past. And so the news breaks over there. Project Cold Case had done a spotlight on this case in the months leading up to all of this breaking. Right. And our phone is going crazy. Yeah. And JSO is not ready to announce the arrest yet.
They didn't for like almost a week.
Yeah. And you know, it was awkward. And of course, they, you know, asked us, and I say us, both, you know, of us, your family and myself and my organization, to, you know, not really go rogue and start, you know, talking about things that they weren't ready to have public yet.
That's right.
So we
did
honored that.
We honored,
you know,
absolutely.
And they had the big press conference that we saw pictures of. In there, where the whole your family was there.
Reporters were coming to our house, camping out on our streets. They actually, I'm not sure who the reporters were, but one of the reporters from Louisiana tracked down my sisters through phone numbers that were under my name, you know, and and my sister in California knew what had happened, but wasn't, you know, ready for a phone call like that.
Right.
So I'm not sure how she deflected it or what she said, but it basically she didn't elaborate on anything. They actually, reporters here in Jacksonville, were going around to every Farah in the book, which
There's
I'm
a
sure
number of them.
I'm sure they covered every corner of town, but they were knocking on, you know, relatives' doors and asking for, you know, comments. And at that time, my family had been notified, and I asked, you know, not to make any comments. Obviously, it wasn't their place, or, you know, out of respect for my mom, you know, to not make any comments, and none of them really did.
Yeah, and I had the same thing. They're calling me and they're going, well, you know, you posted this story, and now we're hearing that this is an arrest connected to that. And all I could say was, well, we sure hope that's the case, and you know, we haven't heard that officially, and we're gonna you know, we're gonna have to wait until the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office makes their announcement if that's the case. But that's certainly why we do this, and why we share this, is hoping that these cases get resolved. And the whole time, of course, you know, we obviously knew everything that was going on and had been kept in the loop. But that's the process. That's how it has to be.
It has to be. That's correct.
And we, so then we get to the point where they bring him, extradite him.
Finally got him back. He fought extradition.
Yeah.
And the governor of Florida and Louisiana both signed an extradition order, which I have copies of in my truck. And they got him back. And, you know, I asked them about, you know, I wanted to go and talk to him in the jail.
Yeah, right then. Yeah.
And they're like, no, you can't do that. They, you know,
you got to protect the integrity of the case.
Whatever I want?
Yeah. They're trying to.
You know, he has an attorney. He's not going to talk to you. And you know, there was questions I had for him. It got back to him that I did want to talk to him, and you know.
Well, and there were people raising money for his.
Oh gosh.
His defense fund, again, not knowing his name. Calling him Uncle Louie, thinking that they knew this guy so well that they were willing to put their own money up, you know, to help his defense, which was really a slap in.
Yeah, you know,
I
never let that really bother me. You know, I just say, you know, you do if you're willing to give up your hard-earned money to help this person. And
if a line's been drawn in the sand and you're going to stand with a murderer.
Hey, listen, you know, I told my family, don't go on here to these silly pages that they're raising money for him for. They had a Facebook page for him. If you do not have thick skin, don't get on there and let that stuff get to you. You know,
I read a few of them, but it was so silly. It was like anybody with half a brain. You know, it's like, I just can't believe that he would murder somebody. My 6-year-old took a picture with him. You know what I mean? And now you're thinking, you know, just because he took a picture with a kid doesn't mean he's
not a murderer. That's why I tell people now, Ryan, I really want to tell my story to the world, that everybody that walks by there knows who he is and what he's done. If you still feel the need to give him money, so be it. But at least know who you're giving money to.
Right.
You know.
Right. And
that's the sad thing is that these panhandlers are out there and they're working to do whatever, if you call that work, and they're taking your money to buy liquor, cigarettes, you know, beer, whatever.
And you really don't know what they did in the past.
He's a murderer.
To get there. Yeah, you know? And he they're raising money, and to me it was obvious because in their GoFundMe or whatever it was, they actually accused Project Cold Case of having so much money that we were funding.
I remember
this.
That escapade or whatever you want to call it.
Somehow we are a part of the state. We're a private nonprofit. We don't get to decide who gets charged.
They all had the money to. So the money that was raised for his defense fund is still sitting out there in a fund, you know?
Yeah. So, you know, it was, I understand people don't want to believe that this guy that they consider, you know, a part of their community and part of their culture could be capable of doing this. But that doesn't mean that he didn't do it.
One of the people, so after this all went down and he pled his guilt to us, I had made a comment, just a short, brief comment on one of the Facebook pages, and people started apologizing and sending me inbox messages. And there was an older lady and husband that sent me a message and said that, you know, we had given him Christmas presents every year and told him that we loved him. And his response to them was, if you knew what I did, you wouldn't love me. And she says, now it all makes sense.
And I remember one of the local papers there, way prior to his arrest, had done a sit-down interview with him, just like they would go around it, and they asked him, well, where have you come from? Tell us about your past and your history. And he said, some things are better left unsaid in the past, or something like that. And again, it seemed like a harmless quote, and probably at the time.
He never said that he came from Jacksonville.
No.
He never wouldn't say. He wouldn't say.
He didn't.
Where he was from or where he'd been.
He's in the local jail, the county jail, waiting trial. He gets attorney, a pretty high profile attorney.
Definitely.
And anybody that has experienced waiting for a criminal trial to take place will understand that none of this is a fast process.
No.
And anybody out there that thinks that if an arrest happens that, a month later, a week later, 3 months later, that you're done, it's just not reality. These things take forever.
That's what I said in one of our interviews, it's just a waiting game.
It is.
The wheels of justice move, but they move very slow.
They do. And so every month they pretty much have a hearing, and you guys would go, and it wasn't even a hearing. It was like a status. It was like...
Not what I would say is a waste of time, because I never wanted... All I had was time, and I told everybody from the beginning, I'll be there every time there's a hearing, regardless of what it is. You want to go, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine.
Right.
Never made any of my sisters go, and I never forced them to do anything against their will. I think a lot of my sisters just, one of my sisters, my youngest sister, just, she has a lot of bad memories of all this, obviously, and she didn't want to. She felt that by her going and her presence being there, it kind of fueled his status, or whatever you may want to call it.
Yeah.
I didn't look at it that way. I mean, it was kind of our moment to shine.
Yeah.
And when this whole process went through, and I know you're going to be leading up to a couple other questions, and I'll be able to answer those too.
Yeah.
So.
You kind of hit it though. Everybody grieves differently. Everybody handles this kind of stuff differently, and even within a tight knit family, there can be differing opinions on how things go.
It never caused any friction between us.
But you both respected each other's stance.
She's entitled to feel the way she wants to feel, and I kind of think that if she would have gone to the interview, that it would have been maybe helpful to her. I don't know, but I never pushed her. Yeah.
Well, so the case is proceeding slowly through the courts, status hearings, those kinds of things monthly. And the prosecutors are starting to schedule depositions. Johnny Miller did not look to be in very good health.
No.
When he was, we're talking about somebody that basically lived on the street, lived day to day with whatever money he made depended on where he slept.
Sure.
And so he was not in great health, didn't look like it. And so there was some desire to try to get this thing to trial as quickly as possible.
Sure.
But that is a relative term. That still was, we were, 9 months in, 10 months into this process when the prosecutors started calling to set up depositions.
January of 18.
January. And they called the 14-year-old who was the eyewitness and basically the key witness. She held everything. And they got a hold of a family member that said, "Oh my gosh, you guys don't know. She passed away."
She passed away in December.
Yeah, the month earlier.
17, December 19th, I believe it was. And we called in January. The state attorney called to schedule some depositions, and that's when they found out. And
the case starts to unravel.
We had to disclose that, obviously, to the defense. And another setback. There was a couple of bumps in the road before that, but then they sat us down and told us that. They brought us all in. I'm thinking, okay, cool. This guy's gonna. I was thinking, different scenarios. Oh, he's going to confess, or maybe,
Yeah.
Maybe he's tired of sitting in jail and he's trying to figure out,
Yeah, he's trying to work some kind of
plea
deal.
some kind of deal. And unfortunately, it was what we found out is that she was 57 years old and she passed away unexpectedly, very unexpectedly. The kids and family were not expecting that.
Right.
And we asked them, where do we go from here? And we had a couple of different options. And
none of them were great.
None of them were good. I mean,
it was basically, well, let's see if they're interested in a plea
look
deal.
good, and
Yeah. It's like we can. I mean, they were facing the reality of having to just drop the charges and let them go.
There was some talk that they could drop the charges for now, suspend the charges.
Yeah.
And look into it further.
See if they could find anything.
But I think we had everything we needed. Obviously, we had everything we needed before she passed.
Right.
Once she passed,
yeah, it wasn't going to get any better.
The window.
Yeah. The case was not going to get better once she was gone.
But we did what we had to do, made the announcement to the defense, and it's all a process. Mm-hmm. But somewhere in between, us dropping the charges and hearing, from what I understand, he went to his attorney and said, I want to confess to these people what I did in lieu of being released on time served, which ended up being 344 days.
Right, just under a year.
And, and it's like, what do you do? And I had questions. And I said, well, if he's going to do that, he's going to sit down and talk to me.
Yeah. He's
going to answer some of these questions that I have and tell me what I want to know. And that day happened.
Yeah.
And
he agreed. I mean, there really was no choice at that point.
No.
The state had tried everything. The investigators had tried everything.
He knew he was going to be released.
He knew he was going to be released, and he honestly,
some kind of fear. I don't know, but he came and wanted to plea, which
which meant he was going to be a convicted felon. He was going to have to stand up in court and admit that he was pleading guilty because he was guilty.
Murder, that's right.
Because there's this thing where the judge asks, are you pleading guilty because it's in your best interest or because you're guilty?
Yeah, Judge Cox was very thorough with him, and she does not mess around. She questioned him thoroughly about, which I guess any judge would, but she actually told him that she admired the fact that he came forward and admitted his guilt.
Yeah.
That not too many people would have done that.
Right.
Which, listen, I don't want to give the man any credit.
Right.
Than necessary, but he did. I told him that I told him when we had to sit down, if you do what I ask of you to do, I'll make things smooth for you. Basically.
And that was so. The agreement was, he pleads guilty, admits his guilt, and sits down with you guys.
Right.
And in return, he gets time served, which ends up being under a year in jail, not even in prison. In county jail, and he's a free man. I mean, he's a convicted felon, but we're not talking about somebody that
it's not like he's
filling out applications for CEO positions and executive positions.
Any position of integrity. He's a self-employed street performer.
Right.
There's no job interview. There's no drug test.
Probably that can't afford to go buy a weapen anyway. He's not probably doesn't vote. All those things that were going to affect weren't really going to affect him.
He went basically back to doing what he was doing for the past 20-something years.
Yeah. But let's talk about your meeting, because we talked to a lot of families, and a lot of times they go, I just want to sit down with them, and I want to have a conversation. I want to find out, what happened. And those are rare, because you can't just have one person that wants to have that conversation. The state's got to agree, then the defendant's got to agree, and his attorneys have to agree, and there's this whole big setup, But he did agree to sit down and talk with you and tell you, his recollection of what happened that day.
I mean,
40, at that point, 44, almost 44 years earlier. And, I wasn't in there for that meeting. I didn't sit in on that, but I've obviously talked to you and a number of other people that were in there. But what is your questions to him, his responses to you?
Well, they had me, they asked me what kind of questions you could ask them, and I had a list of questions, but I mean, so it's me, my mom, my oldest sister, Lorraine, Margot Radigan, his attorney,
right,
and they're pretty much sitting next to me. My mom, sisters are on my left. Carl from the state attorney's office.
Carl Harms.
Pam from the state attorney's office.
Hazel,
Melissa Nelson.
Melissa Nelson, the state attorney.
Dan Jansen across from me, and then you have Tim Quick and a couple of investigators. Tim and I have become good friends. A couple other investigators, a uniformed police officer, and I mean, there's 12, 14 people in this room.
Not quite the intimate conversation you probably had in mind, but these are the things that you have to agree to sit there across from the person that killed your dad.
Sure. And I mean, they're questioning me, saying, "Hey, are you okay? You're not going to jump across the table and attack on him." I'm like, "No."
Yeah,
believe me. I mean, my life's worth 10 times more than his. I'm not going to attack him. I'm not going to disrespect my mother.
Oh gosh, yeah, you can't do that to your family.
I'm not going to.
You can't do that to your dad's name.
And it was very weird, very strange. It didn't. It wasn't emotion. It wasn't. I wasn't going to show any emotion, on my part. I just asked him several questions. We were in there for about 45 minutes. My mom kind of nudged me towards the end and was like, just kind of like leave the man alone. And I was like, no.
I got this is my one chance.
This was my one chance, and that's probably, pretty much what I was thinking in my head. And I asked him all the questions I wanted to ask him. I asked him, did anybody put you up to this? Did somebody put you up to going and robbing my dad? And then this guy comes clean and tells me that he's a friend of my father's, that he's in there 3 times a week. He shops in my dad's store not 3 times a week, 3 times a day. He comes in my dad's store 3 times a day. He's 16 years old. He lives down the street. He had to quit school.
He found the gun, right?
He said, ironically, he said he went to the same school that we all graduated from, which was Erie.
Yeah.
He said he found a gun and was going to show it to my father.
Right.
And then something overcame him, and he made the biggest mistake of his life, and he pulled the gun out and decided to rob my dad. He was actually holding the cake mix box in one hand and the gun in the other. And he said my dad was trying to protect the young girl.
Yeah.
When he saw the gun, he lunged at the gun, and the gun went off.
Yeah.
And when the gun went off, he realized he shot my dad, and he took off running. I asked him what he did with the gun. He said he left it on an empty train. I asked him, I said, have you ever told anybody that you did this? He said he never admitted to anybody that he had ever done it. He had several siblings and never told them. And
we're always told that cases like this, the way they get solved is because people always talk. Right. Yeah. Somebody always runs their mouth. They don't happen in a vacuum. Somebody says it to somebody and then they get in trouble and they use it as a means to get out. And I tend to believe that. I mean, I want to ask you what you thought was real and what his story, but I tend to believe it because this guy's job was a statue, which means he sat there in his own mind every single day. And I can't think of a worse place to be if I'd ever harmed somebody than stuck in my own head. But for him,
it was normal.
It was normal.
I don't know. When he came and he described my father and how he sat and told my mother and my sister and I and everybody else in that room that how my dad was always good to the kids and that he spent extra time with the kids, and this guy sitting here telling me that when a kid approaches him, he spends extra time with the kids, and he learned that from my father. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? And when he said that, it just kind of, I'm thinking if you learned anything from this whole process, I'm glad you learned something from my dad.
Right. Well, he said, originally I was going to show Mr. Freddie the gun. You know what I mean? There was this respect from a young kid you know, to your father who had a business in his neighborhood,
Right.
and then he says something overcame him, and
He said he made the biggest mistake of his life. He chose to rob him, you know, and I did something kind of that impacted kind of everybody in the room. Some maybe didn't like what I did, but I took a bullet out of my pocket. And it was not. It was just a unspent
it wasn't a
round.
threat. Yeah,
No, it wasn't a threat at all. I just said that, and I put it on the counter and I slid it on the table and I slid it in front of him and I said, that right there, that item changed the whole course of our lives, yours included.
Yeah.
I said, had you not chose to, you know, use something like that, I wouldn't even know who you are.
Right.
I mean, we wouldn't even be sitting here. I said, look, you're a 62-year-old grown man, and look at you. You're all shackled up and chained up and everything, and look at what you're dealing. And he kept apologizing.
Yeah.
He kept staring at that bullet, but he kept apologizing. And I didn't plan on taking that in there. It wasn't something I staged. It's just something I was getting dressed, and I saw it sitting on my dresser, and I said, wow, let me just stick that in my pocket. You know, it's not like I didn't carry a weapon in there.
Right.
You know, they you know.
And it wasn't for show. There was no cameras in there.
No,
there was
no
not
cameras.
a,
Nobody was recording. Nobody was doing anything. But people were taken back by it.
Yeah.
And,
They probably wouldn't have let you do that. But if you had told them you were going to walk in there.
I didn't ask them.
No,
but I didn't,
sure.
You know, but
did you think he was truthful with you?
You know, I think as truthful as he could be.
Yeah.
There was a reason. I asked him why he left Jacksonville. He wasn't really truthful about that because I knew why he left, and I won't really talk about that. But he left here because of a reason.
Yeah.
And he was sent by his family to get out of town in '89.
Okay.
I knew why because I was informed.
Right.
And I asked him. He made up a different story, and that's fine. That didn't really.
It didn't really have anything to do with.
Really
I mean, if he was in town until '89 and this happened in '74, you know, it wasn't
actually ironic because I mean, you know, I was in sales, you know, for a really long time, and I was out in the community and stuff. So it's kind of weird how if I ran into him, I'd have never known it, you know. But you always think, you know, in that big circle. You know, in our family having so many different businesses in town and restaurants and different things, could I have seen him or met him along the way, or his family, which now
you actually have confirmation
dealt with some of his family in a restaurant setting and didn't realize it until recently.
Right, and that's, you know, we have a wide-ranging audience of people that have experienced an unsolved homicide and people that are just interested in unsolved homicides. And for people that are just interested and haven't experienced this is a common theme in our world. Is that the guy that killed my loved one? Because you never know. You do not have a face with that.
My sister said that. My sister would, you know, said that she always would maybe look at a person and just second guess and wonder, hey,
we hear that
could you be
all
the person?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, we hear that.
And you never know. And ironically, Ryan, I told my mom, I said, you know, at Easter when I told her all this, and she's like, well, why do you let this bother you? I said, Mom, I don't let it bother me, but what if this guy is bagging your groceries at the grocery store? Yeah. What if he's the guy that you hired to blow your roof off one day, you know, and he doesn't know you, you don't know him, and you're paying him.
Right.
I mean, how do you not want to know or wonder?
Well, and there's always this fear, and it wasn't in this case that we know of, but that this person gets away with it once and they go on to do it. We don't really know that. What we know is that he only had some misdemeanor arrests.
But
arrests.
Okay, so you kill a man in 1974 and you got away with it.
Yeah.
How do you know that in 1989 he didn't kill somebody else?
And that's why
he hadn't been.
No, it's true. I mean, but that's our fear always is that this person's going to go on and do this to somebody else's family.
Again. It's kind of like unfortunately, like a child molester. Yeah. That gets freed after a certain time, and then he commits the same crime again. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, is always playing in our heads. Like, not only are we want answers for our own self, but we're trying to protect unknown families, you know, from having to go through this. And you know, people that have experienced this understand that, and people that haven't experienced this, they typically don't think like that.
They
like,
don't.
oh, why are you so adamant? Why are you bringing it up, you know, every year? Or, you know, well, at the end of the day, we're trying to protect your family as well. You know, we don't know.
A really sad situation with Miss Lyles.
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
she was my daughter's music teacher at San Jose, and that was the second time. That somebody had beat her and
broken
actually
into her home and
killed her the second time.
Killed her the second time, yeah. And she had been severely beaten in a home invasion, you know, years earlier.
And I did not know that until after she was passed.
Yeah.
And you know, she was a very sweet lady. She really cared about the kids. You know, and then Michael passing away before any type of closure or whatever. You know, it's just a sad situation.
It's a sad situation. Yeah. Bobby, is there anything we didn't hit on? Was there anything that I
wanted to tell you, I want to rewind just a bit.
Yeah.
With that interview with Johnny Miller, I told him, I asked him if he was going to be honest with me and do the right thing by me, and he said yes, he would. He asked me what is it that I wanted him to do. I told him that when you get back to Louisiana, you let all your friends know that you did kill my father, that we didn't just randomly come get you off the street of Louisiana.
Which was some frivolous, like literally somebody said that in a comment.
Yes,
you know, like
frivolous evidence.
Of all the people you could pick to pin a murder on, you're going to drive from Jacksonville to New Orleans and find a street performer that is well known in that area.
Well known. We didn't know.
We didn't know who. But I mean, you know, some people need to think before they write things.
There were some pretty stupid comments on there. But like I said, if you don't have thick skin,
don't read the comments. Yeah. But he did. He was released that.
Yep. That night. Well, I told him. I said, here's what I want you to do. If I find out that you're running your mouth or that you're not being honest with people when they ask you. And I will find out. I told him I would find out that I would come and stand beside him, and I'd put a bucket in front of me, and I'd hold a sign up, and I'd see whose bucket fills up faster, his or mine.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yes, sir." He told me, "Yes, sir," 2 or 3 times, and told me that he was going to do the right thing, that he needed to get it off of his chest, that he's been carrying around my dad's murder because he said my dad was his friend.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very strange to hear somebody that killed your father say that.
Right.
You know.
Right. And he didn't. You know, it's a slippery slope. You went in there with a loaded weapon and you tried to rob him.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean,
you know what can happen.
And my sister spoke up. They asked, you know, did my mom want to say anything? My sister want to say anything? My sister spoke up and said, you know, if you would have asked my dad for the money, he would have given it to you. Yeah. He never demanded anything. He never demanded any money. You know, so.
Well, and oh man, it was a tragic, you know, murder. It was this 43-year buildup, and you know, one of the reasons I wanted to have you in here today was I worry sometimes that when we don't have a face and then an arrest happens, that you know, you think that everything's back to normal. And it's not. Nah. You know, I mean, your dad didn't come back the day they made the arrest of Johnny Miller. He didn't come back when he pled guilty. Right. You and your family lost him on that day, and he didn't get to walk any of his 3 daughters down the aisle. He didn't get to watch any of you graduate, right? From and some of your sisters went on to be very, very successful, you know, something I know he's proud of, still looking down,
Absolutely.
But that all of you are proud of. He never met one of his grandchildren.
No. He's, you know, there's so much, and that's what my mom was saying. There's just so much that he missed out on. You know, not just, you know, just from every little detail to every large success story.
Every single birthday, every single holiday, every single family gathering, every single vacation. I mean, just every single night being able to tuck you in or say good night or say good morning. You know what I mean?
He worked a lot of hours in the store anyway, so what little time we did get to see him was a treasure, you know?
Yeah. I remember, I know one of your sisters mentioned all those things in her impact statement, you know, and I remember having a private meeting too, where she was, you know, struggling with the idea that this was going to be the resolution.
Right.
You know, it wasn't much of a choice, but this was going to be the resolution. And she still, at that moment, was like, you know, he never met my kids. He never saw me graduate. He didn't get to walk me down the aisle. You know, and I guess I'm going a long way around here to say that, you know, when you find yourself getting an arrest in your case, hopefully we want it in every one of those cases, just be prepared that there's still
a long road, and even after, you know, that conviction, it may still not be what you feel is adequate.
Right.
You know,
it is not up to us.
No.
And he is, from our understanding, he is back in New Orleans. He's got his hat on.
Yeah.
He's got his bucket out in front, and he's collecting money.
For money.
And we do know that there have been people that know you that have come up and let him know who they are.
They have.
Not necessarily, you know, being nasty or rude or anything, but just always reminding him that
somebody's watching, and you know, if you will,
he that we know who he really is now.
Who he is,
you know what he's done, and you know, it's not the perfect ending to this,
No.
and you know, just being on the outside and a little bit connected to you guys and knowing, like, from the lowest low, you know, and then the peak, the spike of finding out that an arrest was made, and finally being able to put a face with this, and then to think you're going to get justice, and that comes in many forms. You know what I mean? And
you know,
the just complete drop off, and you can show these slideshow
sure,
Clint,
it was important for me to know why, and you know, just to kind of alleviate some of the rumors or whatever you might want to call them, that just to clear the air about my dad's death.
Because people start to speculate, and people create scenarios. We've talked about that in the past, where you're trying to come up with something that makes sense.
You want to know something, so you grasp at anything.
And sometimes that stuff starts to get legs, and people start to question whether that's real or not. True. And it's one of the major struggles with not knowing. And you at least were able to get to the bottom of those things and what happened.
And you know, it's something that even Margot Radigan told me. She's like, do you realize how fortunate the circumstances are that you were able to get those answers from him? Not that it happened the way it happened, but there's people on death row that know they've killed somebody and know they're going to die tomorrow, but still deny the fact that they did what they did.
You know,
and for him to come, I mean, and like I said, I don't want to give this man any more credit than what's due or whatever, but for him to come,
he's no hero, you know. But
he could have kept his mouth shut and walked free and never.
What he did do, you want acknowledged, but
he did,
you're not gonna,
and he did that. I mean,
and Margot is right. She, you know, if he had gone to death row, he's never going to tell you a word, because he's going to be hoping for a stay of execution, an appeal for till the day that needle goes in.
And he could have done that even if he was convicted and the judge may have found him guilty. He could have appealed it. You know, he had nothing to lose.
Right.
I mean, this kind of just cuts through some of the BS and the constant having to go to court. You see the picture here. And
we pulled this off the wall. This stays up in our office, which is the article until today. We pulled it down. We're gonna make you a better one, Bobby. One without a yellowed out newspaper clipping. But
that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah, our board chair, actually, Rich Commando. I wasn't able to come to the press conference because our grant does an annual audit where they come in and they make sure, and I asked them, you know, can we switch the time, can we switch the day, and they were adamant, no, we can't. So my board chair made this and brought it in, and then we watched the press conference streamed live while they were in there doing our grant audit.
And then they probably realized we probably should have let you go,
because at one point the sheriff mentions Project Cold Case, and I'm not there, but you know, those are the things that happen. You know, we have responsibilities we had to take care of. I knew you were in good hands, and that was one of those peak days. You know, Bobby, I'm thrilled that you came down today and were able to tell this story. There's still, I know there's probably things that people are dying to know and ask you and talk about. And, we, any questions that people post on the comments whenever they watch this, we'll try to answer. You'll try to answer. And,
I know I've said this before, but I want to thank the sheriff's office. I want to thank Dan Jansen. I want to thank Margot Radigan, Glenn Workentine, Detective Reeves, all those guys, Dave Scott and
Dave Meacham, and Pam Hazel, of the state attorney's office, Carl Harms, Melissa Nelson,
all of them.
There was
there's a lot of people behind the scenes too that
who scanned those prints and got that hit. Rachel. You know what I mean? They're
she did a lot of that stuff, and she's friends of mine, but couldn't obviously couldn't say anything.
It's it really was amazing to watch unfold, and like you said, although it didn't necessarily end perfect.
There is no perfect.
You can't turn back the hands of time and go back to that day and have your dad, not killed.
And another thing is the family, and I'm not going to mention her name, but the family of the witness told the detectives that she was so happy to try to help our family. And I never got to thank her for that.
That's a rarity too. A lot of times these witnesses don't want to cooperate and they don't want to get involved. And she was the opposite.
Complete opposite. She actually, her family moved her out of Jacksonville because of this scenario. Is what I was told. She was so traumatized by it. That's when they moved to another state.
Can you imagine being a 14-year-old girl running up to the convenient corner store to buy something,
and then you see your friend. My dad was her friend. Johnny Miller told us in that meeting how my dad would give the kids candy if they didn't have money. It's almost like you want to tell them, just don't say anything more. It's just digging deeper.
Well, anyway, Bobby, appreciate you coming in. I hope this offered a lot of people a glimpse into kind of the reality of living with a cold case for 43 years, getting an arrest.
And a little bit of a letdown,
not
if you would
not being.
That,
I think sometimes we build it up to be something that it's not. At the end of the day, nothing's going to bring our loved one back.
And my mom told me that.
Yeah, and so you just keep expectations reasonable.
I didn't do it. No, I mean I knew that was going to happen.
Sure.
I did it to find out who and why.
Right.
And once really those questions were answered. Whatever happened after that was kind of downhill for me,
Yeah, you had kind of come to terms. You had what you wanted, and what you needed, and that really was that meeting with him and to ask some of those questions and know who he was.
Right.
And those things were resolved for you.
That was important for me.
Yeah, It's not always that way for everybody. Some people want a needle, an electric chair, whatever.
And I understand that.
Sure.
I understand that.
But always be respectful of a family member and how they are handling, what's going on and what is important to them. You know what I mean? I guess fine that they have those opinions, but I know it was sometimes frustrating when somebody would come up and say, well, I wouldn't have let that happen, or I would have taken care of it myself, or you know what I mean? How could they let them go? Well, this is why we did this today. I mean, it's been almost an hour and a half, that we've been on here. And we, scratched the surface. I mean, we're talking 43 years of waiting and then 2 full years since then. There's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of things that are out of our control, out of your control, out of the detective's control, out of the state attorney's office control. You do the best you can with what you have. This is how it ended. With him, but that's not the end of the story. You know what I mean?
No, we've had news reporters calling. We've had people calling you.
Film producers. Yeah, there's always somebody that's trying to get a story and tell this story. There's a lot of interesting parts to it. I'm glad that you were able to come out here and kind of tell it. And without having to edit it down for
30 seconds.
Yeah,
or
for
3
I mean, and
minutes
look,
or
I
whatever it is.
truly appreciate the media when they come in
Sure.
and,
They did
and
a great
allow
job.
us to share these stories and allow families to share their stories. But they're limited. They just
didn't-
can't do
They
it.
didn't. I told them that if they were disrespectful, I wasn't going to talk to them anymore.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, all the media outlets were respectful.
Yeah, they were, and they did the best they could with what their limitations are,
And they want that sensation. That's what
they
sells.
do, they do, and they're, if you notice today, we talked a lot about you and your family and your dad, and we mentioned Johnny Miller. We show a couple pictures of him, but typically in these cases, it's the defendant that is always talked about. It's the defendant that's picture's always
That's
up.
right.
It's the, what I mean, and he's the one on trial, so it's a lot of talk about that, and we don't ever want lost in that, to be the
Right.
victim and what this did to a family or a community. I mean, you start to see the far-reaching impact of your dad not owning that store
Oh yeah.
anymore. And who was it? Was it your cousin whose parents owned another store that literally that day
Several of them closed their store.
locked the door, left
One of
everything
them on that
as
same street on Kings Road.
yeah,
Left the store and never went back.
never went back.
You
The kids in the neighborhood that had a place to go and somebody they could go talk to and admire, and your
Yeah.
dad didn't have that after that day. It's sad all the way around.
Two of my uncles said they went and picked up their kids, took them to the beach that day, and closed their store and never went back.
Never went back.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you again, Bobby,
Yep.
for coming in and sharing all this with us. It's a ton of great information. A couple of things I want to hit on Project Cold Case related. We've mentioned it on here a couple times. We have a scholarship in partnership with a local social worker and friend, DJ7, that does all our events. Bobby's met him. He did our event at
Yep.
Joey's in concert with a band. Like they had a band, they'd rotate back and forth.
Sure.
And then he did our Year of Hope event this year. And we've got a $1,000 scholarship available to any student going into college or currently in college. You have to have a 2.0 GPA. It doesn't matter where you live, what school you're going to, or what degree you're getting. What we want from you is a one-page essay that just tells us your struggles, what you've gone through in life, and what you're going to do with that degree to make the world a better place. And we'll review those, and we'll be awarding a $1,000 scholarship for the fall semester coming up, and then we're going to try to keep that scholarship going every year and maybe even grow it some too. So if you go to projectcoldcase.org/scholarship, that's where the application is, and that's where the details are. We'll try to post a link to that in the comments as well later. Also going on right now is the Jaguars Give and Go program, which allows us as a nonprofit to sell tickets to the Jaguar home games at a kind of reduced nonprofit rate, and then we get a portion of those sales, and we've already sold 130 tickets. So every ticket we sell from here on out, the organization gets $30 for every ticket, and those tickets are $40, $45, and $50. So we can literally get $30 out of a $40 ticket. So if you're going to any Jag games, you can go to projectcoldcase.org/Jaguars, and you can connect to the link to pick your game and how many tickets you want. And last but never least, we have a new partnership with our buddy Colton up in Memphis, who runs Hard Knot Designs, and he does the signs. You see him there. You saw it behind Bobby and I the whole time. He makes candles. He does coasters. He donated some coasters to us for our event last year. And if you order through his site, which is it just hardknotdesigns.com? Yeah, hardknotdesigns.com, and use the discount code PCC, we, I don't know, it says receive 10% off your order, and we get that 10%. So, so that's how that's going to work with our partnership with Colton. Thanks again for joining us today. You can see Colton's sign that he made for us back here. We look forward to seeing you next week. Bobby, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, buddy.
It's always good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Y'all take care. We'll see you again
All right.
next week.
Thanks.